Hi, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Prog Takes. We have a special guest joining us today. We decided to bring our good buddy Geoff into the festivities.
Hey,
And of course, Kyle is joining me as well. Good to see you guys.
good to see
Hello.
you. Hello, hello.
So, we've been having a lot of fun with these episodes, and it generates a lot of discussion. And we love the comments. We like to hear what you guys think and
Yep.
present your case on some of these. And we brought up another hot topic, which I think is something that gets debated a lot. That bands with no original member should stop, and certainly this can be varied. Maybe there's one original member. Maybe there's a handful. It could be a band like Yes, that's a revolving lineup, or a band like Kansas that sort of right now is with no members, no original members anymore, or some show up here and there. So, um, you know, Kyle, why don't you start because you've been my partner on these past episodes. What's your view on this, and yay or nay? Where are you on this?
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit of both. I'm sort of like a free market guy in a certain sense, and so it's kind of like if Foreigner wants to go out on the road with no original members and sell, $500 front row tickets and people buy them. I guess like my resting philosophical approach is let them, and if people don't want to buy it, they won't buy it. And I guess it sort of begs the question: what's bigger? Is it the songs that Foreigner wrote, or is it the band members that wrote them and recorded them? And at this point, it's this sort of ever-evolving group of chairs where the players, some of them have been with the band for 30 years. So, like, what says they can't have the right to call themselves Foreigner? And so, I'd love to have a real hard-lined approach where it's like, no, Foreigners holy and they need to only have their original members. But I mean, let's get real. It's just, that era of music is dying off, and I guess I'd rather have Foreigner as it is than not at all. So,
Geoff, where are you on
Yep.
this?
So, I'm a Yes fan, and all the time, every time there's a new album, every time there's a new tour, there's a certain amount of Yes fandom who say, Steve Howe shouldn't be doing this. And one of the arguments that gets put out there, it doesn't have any original members, you know, but Yes has Steve Howe, right, who arguably joined the band in 1970, arguably saved it from obscurity, wrote, you know, major input in writing every, apart from the Raven albums, he's pretty much on all of them, making a massive contribution. And he's steering that particular ship. Some people will say if there's no John Anderson, it's not Yes. Well, they've got a really good singer. It's not the quality of the performance, um, that's that of the singer that suffers. Um, and to me, the whole line of because there's no original members, bands should stop. I don't think that's legit. Um, I mean, there's so many kind of avenues this conversation could take. Um, there are probably bands out there with original members who are actually, not that good. Like famously in the 1980s, the guys from the Byrds weren't doing anything. The original drummer went and copyrighted the name, went out, got a bunch of musicians, went out in the road. He was an original member, he had the copyright, but nobody felt that was in the spirit of the people who had written and performed the music. If you look at the late 1980s, Mick and Keith fell out. There wasn't much Rolling Stones activity. If Bill Wyman had, who was an original member, had gone out as the Rolling Stones, nobody would have said that that's, legit because he was an original member, right? It's not, he wasn't the person who wrote all the big songs. He wasn't the person that people go to see when they go to see the band live. And
so
I
more or
think what we
less, it's bassists and drummers can't do the band thing.
but I think there's also this thing. You talked about Kansas and you talked about Foreigner, right? You know, like they are relatively faceless bands. They weren't
Yeah,
bands
I
who were
think so. Yeah.
famous because they were good looking. They could probably quite freely walk around the streets and not necessarily be recognized unless it was a hardcore fan. So, if they're performing credibly, and as you say, Cal, it's a free market thing. People hopefully won't if they're going to see Kansas, they're not expecting to see Steve Walsh and Kerry Livgren. They probably know what they're going to hear, and by all accounts, they'll hear a really good show from a band who have arguably made, some of the strongest albums in the Kansas catalog, certainly stronger than some of the albums that were made when the band was packed with original members. So I think they have earned the right to keep doing that.
I went to see Foreigner and Styx about a year ago, and I hadn't seen Foreigner. Actually, Foreigner is maybe one of those classic rock bands I never saw live. That just skated past me, and I was a fan. I liked them a lot. I still like them today. Um, Styx I've seen a number of times, but never with Dennis DeYoung. So it's sort of like a weird show to see, but it was super enjoyable. Styx right now with Tommy Shaw and James Young and Lawrence Gowan. It's great. They are amazing live, and it's a fun show, and you know every song. And then Foreigner was surprising too because it's just the greatest hits. I mean, I took my younger son to the show, and he wasn't even sure about the name Foreigner and what he was going to see. And on the way there, I played you're going to be hearing these songs, and he knew all of them just by being on Earth. I like to use that phrasing. It's like you just know them
just by having ears. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it is. It's one of those things where it's like I think we have to embrace that this era that we're living in is the same as hundreds of years ago when people were making classical music, and that music has to live on, right? Mozart and Bach and Beethoven and all that stuff. That's still stuff that a good portion of people listen to today. It's great. It's great that it exists, and so I think why not have some of the bands play? I think also in many cases, like what Foreigner's doing, what Kansas is doing correctly, I might add, is that they are overseeing the quality control of it, right? So it was started by Mick Jones. He's hiring all the guys. He decided Kelly Hansen and the new guy, I don't know his name, that just replaced Kelly Hansen. So I think that that gives it a bit of credibility. It keeps it from being just a tribute band. And I think I used to, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I would have been more against it. But I've come to really enjoy these shows, and I see people enjoying it and singing the songs and keeping that music alive. I don't mind it. Maybe don't make any new albums. Maybe that, but
yeah, because we don't want any of that crap. I think that the more interesting question is at what point should a band full of original older members, once they start to lose their ability to perform, should they call it a day or bring in young help? I think that's an interesting question. I heard on Eddie Trunk, he was talking about a 3-band bill, and it was like maybe Cinderella, Foreigner, and Loverboy. And someone was the guy calling in was being critical of Loverboy, and Eddie was like, well, but Loverboy is the original members, and this guy is 81, and this guy, and so it was like, you can use that argument, but it is at a certain point, it's like, I don't care if Loverboy is the original guy from the band. Like, I just kind of want to hear those 3 songs and enjoy it. So I guess to that question, like, yes, I mean, at this point, you could argue that Steve Howe, it might be to the better service of the band, and it's, I don't know, like live performance for him to step down at a certain point. Geoff would definitely disagree, but.
Well, if I thought that he wasn't able to do it, I imagine that he probably would do it. I think the other one that's an interesting kind of story, I think, if you take something like Yes, Chris Squire is dead, right? So you can't have Chris Squire anymore. Thin Lizzy is a very good example, and you guys probably won't. Well, you'll know that Phil Lynott, obviously the front man, the main writer, the guy, passed away. The band members have got together in various lineups and toured and played those songs. But actually, when they came to record, they decided that they didn't want to call it Thin Lizzy, and so they called the exact Thin Lizzy band for studio recording became Black Star Riders, and they
Right.
made 4 or 5 albums, and they toured under that name, and they still did Thin Lizzy in parallel with it, and it kind of works. I think even Kansas we were talking about, didn't they do? There was an
Forget the
album
name of
there,
it. Yeah.
Native Window, where Steve Walsh wasn't involved, but it was all of the rest of them. They made an album that way. Now, clearly, let's be honest about this. There's value in the brand, right? And that's why no matter who's in the band, having that name, having that logo, will bring people across the door better than a tribute band will. But we're gonna reach a point where there's gonna be no original members of anything still still alive, and as you say, what does it come down to? If you don't like the records they're making, if you don't like the shows that they're doing, you know, just leave it. And yeah, no, yes, pun intended. And
There's another one to that. The Dio band, Last in
yeah,
Line.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah,
they've been coming together, and they knew they couldn't
yeah,
recall it Dio, right? But they want to
yeah,
play those songs, so that's a good one. And they're making new records.
yeah.
Actually, they're not
Well,
bad. So
is it better for these kind of like large bands like the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, bands that when a band member dies, they choose not to go on? Rush hasn't gone on. They haven't even done a tribute show. Is that,
Mm.
I mean, on some level, I respect that.
I think it depends on the lifeline, the timeline of where the band is, right? Like Rush was with Neil Peart for decades.
Yeah.
Replacing him at that point, at their age, after that level, I think, yeah, that would have seemed wrong. I think people eventually, if they got the right drummer and they just did some touring, like anything else, I think people would have probably been okay with it. But it's fine, For a good example is Big Big Train, which is a band that it's a bunch of guys that's what they do. That's all they do. That's their band, and they were on a trajectory of increasing popularity with David Longdon, and then he has a tragic accident that no one sees coming, and I almost feel for the guys as well. Of course, they lost their friend and a great singer, and that's one part of it. But then the other part is that was our livelihood. That's what we were doing. We're supposed to just stop now? It's not that easy, right? I mean, that
Yeah,
they
I think
put a
in
lot
that
of sweat
circumstance,
into that. You know what I mean?
no one expects them to stand down from that just because the band had already cycled. It is an interesting thing. Like it's if a band has been together and been large and been sort of the MTV era or of like the big classic rock era that we hold them to these standards of it being holy. I think otherwise, do we even care? Like Big Big Train, it almost just seemed assumed that they would keep playing. I guess I don't know. It's a
Yeah.
weird
Well, it's a
the
tough
bands that
one. I
get this held
mean,
against them.
Well,
the
I think we were saying just before we came on here, Kiss obviously did their retirement thing, albeit it was two of the original guys. You know, if instead of doing the retirement and the avatars, they'd said, right, Tommy and Eric are going to carry on the band. They're going to get in a new bass player. They're going to get in a new singer. You know, these guys are great. They won't have to use tracks like Paul Stanley may have done. Um, and they're going to have the full show is going to run, and they're going to go out there and do it. I think people would go and see the Kiss show
I think it would.
because
I think people would like it.
I think
I do.
because it's
Mm.
a scene. Yeah, okay, the makeup kind of helps, but it's a bit like why are the most one of the most successful genres of tribute bands is Pink Floyd. Tribute bands. Why? Because nobody really cared what they looked like.
Hmm.
Nobody's going to see a particular thing.
Well, yeah, because the
Um,
music is so timeless and it's great.
and and the other thing is there's very few Beatle tribute bands who don't at least try to look like them. Because if they don't look the same, Beatles doesn't work. There's an element of if they don't look the same, Beatles doesn't work.
Yeah,
Pink
for
Floyd,
sure.
if they don't look the same, nobody cares. And in fact, sure, when they were touring towards the end, the Pink Floyd guys were like 3 of 16 people on stage anyway.
Yeah.
And
I think also there's
Neil Peart wasn't an original member of Rush anyway.
Yeah, we
No,
should have
no.
John Rutsey up there.
correct.
Yeah,
Obviously.
good call. That's why that one.
I think
Strike it.
I think in to some degree there's also a element of just certain particular ones that mean maybe to you a lot to you that would bother you, right? Like I wouldn't go see the ELO 2 or the ELO version without Jeff Lynne. I can't.
Right.
Like I can't imagine wanting to see that.
Okay, but again, look at that one. What happened there? Jeff Lynne decided he didn't want to do the band. A whole pile of people who played on the records.
Yeah.
Bev Bevan, who played on all the records, went, well, okay, he's not going to do this. People want to hear this music. You might argue that actually they helped keep the thing alive for when Jeff did it. Now that then morphed into having like that guy from Styx and stuff like that in it, and became a totally different thing. The other one, in doing my research for this, the band, really huge band still active who have no original members, which I didn't know, Judas Priest.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Judas
really?
Priest formed in 1969. Ian Hill, the bass player, joined in 1970. Rod Halford didn't join till like 1973 or 1974. Neither did Glenn Tipton. So but I guess why did people not kind of do that stuff about Judas Priest? Because it's pretty much the people who made it big.
Yeah.
Yes has had like 28 members, so to nitpick about who's in Yes when you've got Steve Howe in it, to me is just crazy.
I think it's your Rock and Roll Hall of Fame lineup. That's like the original band lineup is kind of silly, especially when it's like that band never did anything. It's almost like Fleetwood Mac, like before it was Fleetwood Mac. Like it's important, but it's not like the band. It's not like who's going to get up on Rock and Roll
It's the
Hall
version
of Fame.
that people know that they are.
That sold the most
with.
records and that were iconic. So. There are a few more bands for what it's worth from the prog space: Soft Machine, Gong, Tangerine Dream, Renaissance. Some of your favorites and mine. They're playing without any original members, but again, they're old. Like, of course, they've lost their original members.
Well,
But again,
I think
Tangerine Dream's a good example of Edgar Froese is the guy who stayed with the band right the way through. He got sick. He chose his replacements. It carries on in the spirit of the thing. And again, it's the type of music. It's fairly faceless. There's no singer in any of it. So, provided you've got
there's
the
a
right
new
sounds,
one.
it sounds like
there's
it.
a new one along these lines that we didn't discuss. Actually, it's the Porcupine Tree one with John Wesley and bass player
Colin Edwin.
Colin Edwin.
And possibly even Chris Maitland, the original
Right,
drummer.
and
They've sort of
they're
hinted
playing
at
the
that.
early stuff that they really weren't even involved in for some reason, and doing that. It's a weird one, but okay.
But I mean that's not gonna sell out arenas or anything.
No.
So it's sort of like, why not? It kind of reminds me in some sense of that Saucerful of Secrets thing, which is different, but it's like it's a way to celebrate music that maybe isn't getting played, and not a bad thing.
I think
there's a fan for it.
To move the topic just one degree over, I mean, it's been fascinating over many years to see. You would have thought with certain bands they couldn't do without this one key member, and then they all survived, right? I mean, Peter Gabriel, obviously that's the top one, but Fish leaving Marillion, Portnoy leaving Dream Theater. There's a number of them. Richie Blackmore leaving Deep Purple. I mean, there's and all those bands continued easily, and some became bigger.
Yeah.
So
Ozzy leaving Black Sabbath was a huge one.
Yeah.
We mightn't have had the Astonishing if that hadn't happened, so.
we can't have that.
That's an end game level what if,
Well, all right. So I think we covered most of it. Any last points here on this one?
I think that was the ultimate statement just there. Actually, can we?
That's a good place to stop. So we'd love to hear your comments. Are you okay with a key member leaving and the band continuing? Are you okay with having no members and the band continuing? Where are you on this? Good or bad? What are some bands you've liked that have done it, some that you haven't? We'd love to hear all your comments. And make sure you check out all the other Prog Take episodes and other stuff on the channel. And we'll see you all another time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for checking out the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on all our socials and ProgReport.com. And we'll see you all again real soon. Thanks.